My stepson claimed I was an outsider and would kick me out of my own house. I packed his bags first and threw him out. His heroics ended on the curb. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. You're not my real dad. The words weren't shouted. They weren't even directed at me, not openly. They slipped from Jacob's mouth one evening, spoken under his breath as he brushed past me in the hallway, but loud enough to land where they were meant to land. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. The sting was sharp, direct, and deliberate. I stood there in the hallway, holding a basket of folded laundry like some servant in a house I had built, listening to the echo of his footsteps as he climbed the stairs. He was only 15 at the time, but he carried himself with the arrogance of someone convinced he knew the world, convinced that the roof above his head was owed to him, not provided. I am 44 years old. I've been married to Karen for 9 years. When we first met, she was already a mother of 2. Jacob was 9, Hannah 7. Their biological father was a ghost in the truest sense of the word. Alive, yes, but absent in every way that mattered. He lived in another state, appearing now and then like a shadow at the edges of our lives. Holidays if we were lucky. Birthdays if it happened to fit his schedule. He'd show up with flashy gifts that barely disguised the emptiness behind them. Toys that broke within a week. Electronics that dazzled but did nothing to fill the void of his absence. The children adored him when he appeared. They always did. Their eyes lit up. Their voices softened. Their laughter bubbled in ways I could never summon. And then he'd vanish again, leaving behind nothing but a silence I was expected to fill. But I stayed. I always stayed. It was me who kept the lights burning, who paid the rent until we bought the house, who signed the checks for school trips, for doctor's visits, for braces, for new shoes when their feet grew faster than my paychecks. I didn't do it for thanks. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I believed that family wasn't about blood, it was about presence. That actions mattered more than names. That if I showed up every day, they'd see me not as a stand-in, but as a father. For years I believed that lie. In the beginning it almost felt true. When they were small, they clung to me. Jacob used to run into my arms when I came home from work, demanding I toss him into the air. Hannah would fall asleep against my shoulder during movie nights. Those moments gave me hope. They made the sacrifices feel like investments in a future where I would truly belong. But children don't stay children. As the years dragged on, the sweetness dissolved. Hannah became quiet, withdrawn, as if the world inside her phone was more real than the people sitting across the dinner table. She spoke in monosyllables, buried in her own world, her affection replaced with apathy. And Jacob hardened into something worse. He grew sharp-edged, arrogant, a boy who mistook my patience for weakness. When I asked for help, simple things like mowing the lawn, carrying groceries, or even just picking up after himself, he'd roll his eyes and mutter, "Why should I? You're not even my dad." Sometimes he'd say it with a smirk, sometimes with that teenage shrug that cut deeper than any insult. Each time it was the same knife, twisted in the same wound. "Karen," she said little. She would sigh, tell me not to take it personally, insist it was just a phase, teenage rebellion, nothing more. But silence has weight. Her refusal to defend me was its own kind of betrayal. When Jacob dismissed me, her lack of response told him he was right. That I was, in fact, just an outsider playing a role. And yet, I endured. I told myself patience was the answer. That respect would come in time. That if I kept paying, kept showing up, kept carrying them, one day they would look back and see who had truly been there. But every year, the gap grew wider. Jacob strutted through the house like it was his kingdom. He slammed doors, barked orders at his sister, treated his mother like a maid and me like a nuisance. Hannah hid in her room, her face lit only by the glow of her screen, her words growing fewer and colder. When I tried to bridge the distance, family dinners, weekend outings, simple conversations, I was met with resistance. Jacob mocked. Hannah shrugged. Karen stayed quiet. And in that silence, resentment took root. I began to notice the smallest things, the tiny fractures that others might have missed. The way Jacob only ever compared himself to his real dad. as if I were invisible. The way Hannah would smile when her father's name was mentioned, a smile she hadn't given me in years. The way Karen's eyes flickered with discomfort when these comparisons surfaced, but how she never spoke up, never defended the man who had built the life they all lived in. It was death by 1,000 cuts. I told myself it was temporary, that this was what teenagers did, that they would grow out of it. But deep down, I felt the truth creeping in. No matter how much I gave, I was still on the outside, a guest in my own home, a wallet, a chauffeur, a handyman, necessary, but never respected, present but never acknowledged. The first time Jacob raised his voice at me, truly raised it, was over something trivial. He had left his dirty shoes on the couch. I asked him calmly to move them. He glared at me and snapped, "You're not anybody to me. Don't tell me what to do." Karen was there. She heard it. She froze, then looked down at her hands. She said nothing. That silence was louder than any scream. I carried the laundry basket into our bedroom that night and set it down without a word. Karen followed me, tried to smooth things over, said Jacob didn't mean it, that teenagers lash out, that I was making too much of it. I nodded, but inside, I was screaming. Because if I wasn't anybody to him, then what had the last 9 years been for? I had given everything. My money, my time, my strength, my life. And in return I was being erased. And that was just the beginning. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind of evening that pretends to be harmless, but in hindsight, reveals itself as the line where everything changed. I had come home from work drained, my shirt clinging with the sweat of overtime hours. The house was alive with the usual noise. Hannah's muffled laughter through her closed bedroom door, Karen clattering pans in the kitchen, Jacob's voice carrying from the living room where he lounged with his phone pressed against his ear. He was pacing, talking louder than necessary, as though he wanted his audience. His invisible friends on the other end of the call, and anyone in the house who might overhear. I should have walked past. I should have let it wash over me like all the other insults and dismissals. But that night, something kept me still, my back pressed against the wall just outside the doorway, listening. His words came sharp and clear. He's a stranger. He has no right to tell us what to do. If he tries, I'll kick him out of this house myself. I froze. The air seemed to thicken, heavy in my lungs. My stepson, the boy I had clothed, fed, chauffeured, paid tuition for, the boy who had grown under the roof I had provided, was bragging to his friends that he could throw me out of the very house my name was on, out of the home I had built brick by brick with my labor. There was no hesitation in his tone, no nervous laugh, no attempt to disguise it as a joke. He said it like fact, with the arrogance of a teenager who had never once considered where his meals came from or who kept the lights burning. A stranger, that's what I was to him. A stranger who worked himself raw to make sure his sneakers weren't worn and his phone bill was always paid. A stranger who bought groceries while his real dad was absent. A stranger who stood in the shadows while Jacob paraded his loyalty to a man who had abandoned him years ago. And then, as if the knife needed to twist, Jacob laughed. His friends laughed with him through the phone. He basked in it, in the sound of their approval. I walked past the doorway then, slow and deliberate, and Jacob caught sight of me. His smirk faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly, his voice turning casual as he ended the call. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just looked at me with that same arrogance, daring me to challenge him, daring me to reveal that I had heard. I said nothing. I simply walked upstairs, every step echoing with his words. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Karen's quiet breathing beside me, the weight of 9 years pressing against my chest. 9 years of sacrifices, of checks written, of time stolen from myself to provide for children who refused to see me. 9 years of hoping patience would grow into respect. And for what? To be called a stranger. To be threatened in my own home. I knew then that the line had been crossed. It wasn't just disrespect anymore, it was contempt. It was open rejection. And the silence from Karen, the complicity of her shrugging off every insult, had paved the way for it. I woke before dawn, my decision carved into me like stone. When the sun rose, I gathered them all in the living room. Karen stood behind the couch, arms folded, eyes already heavy with suspicion. Hannah appeared reluctantly, phone in hand, her thumbs twitching as if even this family meeting was an inconvenience. Jacob strolled in last, his chin lifted, his expression dripping with smugness. I waited for silence, and then I spoke. If I'm a stranger here, then it's time to see who's really in charge. They stared at me unblinking. Jacob's smirk widened, as though he thought I was bluffing. I stood, walked into his room, and pulled his suitcase from the closet. Without a word, I filled it with his clothes, his sneakers, his electronics. Hannah gasped, Karen stammered, but I moved with the calm precision of a man executing a decision long overdue. When the suitcase was full, I carried it to the front door and set it outside. Jacob, I said evenly, your words have consequences. You said I have no right to tell you what to do. You said you could throw me out of this house. But here's the truth. This is my house. I pay for it. And the only person being thrown out today is you. The smirk vanished. His eyes darted to Karen, then back to me, searching for the familiar safety net, the assurance that his mother would step in and rescue him. Karen's face twisted with panic. David, stop this. He's just a boy. He doesn't mean it. I turned to her, my voice sharp enough to slice the air. He meant every word. I heard him. And if he thinks I'm a stranger, then let him live with the man who isn't. Her lips parted, but she didn't stop me. Jacob's voice finally cracked. You can't do this. You don't have the right. I stepped closer, my tone like iron. You told me yourself I have no right. Remember? I'm just a stranger. So let's see how far your real father's rights get you. The silence that followed was absolute. Hannah's eyes flickered from me to her brother, her phone slipping from her hands. Karen's breathing quickened, but she didn't move. Jacob stood frozen, fury warring with fear in his expression. I opened the door, the suitcase waiting on the porch. Out. For the first time in years, Jacob had no comeback. He stepped outside, his sneakers scuffing against the concrete, his shoulders trembling though he tried to hold his defiance. The sound of the door closing behind him was louder than thunder. But I wasn't finished. I loaded his suitcase into the trunk of my car. He tried to argue, to demand that Karen intervene, but I silenced him with a glance. I drove him across town, past the places I had chauffeured him for years. Soccer practices, birthday parties, school events, and instead of turning back home, I pulled into the cracked driveway of a small, worn apartment complex. His biological father's home. The man answered the door in an old t-shirt, hair unkempt, eyes bleary with sleep. He looked at Jacob, then at me, confusion etched across his face. What's going on? He muttered. I lifted the suitcase and set it at his feet. Your son is home. The man blinked. Home? I don't. I cut him off. He says I'm a stranger, says I have no right. So now he's your responsibility. He wants his real dad? Here he is. Jacob's voice rose in panic. Wait, what? You can't leave me here. He doesn't have space. But I had already turned back to the car. The last image I saw was Jacob standing on the doorstep, his father scratching his head, bewildered and unprepared. No room, no food, no plan, and no real desire to take care of the boy he had abandoned years ago. I drove away in silence, the weight in my chest replaced with something colder, something sharper. Resolve. That night, Karen's fury erupted. She screamed, demanded, cursed my name. Then she packed a bag and left for her sister's house, dragging Hannah with her. For the first week, I lived in silence. The house was heavy, empty, but it was mine. No insults, no eye rolls, no contempt echoing through the walls I paid for. Then the messages began. Jacob admitted, in halting words, that he had gone too far. Hannah wrote that she missed me. Karen confessed she had let the children disrespect me for too long. But I didn't reply, because words alone don't change anything. They had drawn the line, and I had shown them what it meant. The drive to his father's place was quiet, but not peaceful. Jacob sat stiff in the passenger seat, arms crossed, jaw tight. His phone was clutched in his hand, but he didn't use it. For once, his smirk was gone. The boy who had bragged about throwing me out of my own house now stared out the window like he'd been sentenced to exile. I said nothing. I wanted him to sit with it, to feel the silence press against him, to understand that words have weight, and his head finally collapsed on top of him. Every streetlight we passed illuminated his face for a moment. Pale, nervous, trying to look older than he was, but betraying the truth. He was still a child, and he had no idea what waited for him. When we pulled into the cracked parking lot of the apartment complex, Jacob finally broke. "You don't have to do this," he muttered, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't mean it like that." I kept my eyes on the building. "You meant every word. You called me a stranger. You said you'd throw me out. You wanted your real father. So here we are." His grip tightened on the phone. "But he can't. He doesn't." He stopped himself, realizing what he was admitting. I stepped out of the car without another word. He followed, dragging his feet like a condemned man. The door opened after the third knock. His father stood there, unshaven, hair sticking up, wearing a faded shirt with a beer logo. His eyes darted between me and Jacob, confusion laced with irritation. "What's this?" he asked, scratching his chin. I lifted the suitcase and set it on the threshold. "Your son." The man blinked, then laughed nervously. "My son? What's going on? Why's he?" I cut him off. "He says I'm a stranger. He says I have no right in his life. So now it's your turn. You raised him with your blood. Let's see what that counts for." Jacob's eyes widened. "Wait, you're really leaving me here?" He doesn't even. But his father wasn't listening. He was already glancing behind him into the cluttered apartment, calculating the space he didn't have, the money he didn't want to spend, the responsibility he had avoided for years. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Look, I wasn't expecting this," he stammered. "I don't have a bed for him, barely have food in the fridge. You can't just." I met his eyes, cold and unflinching. "Can't just? For years I've been the one who couldn't just walk away, couldn't just say no, couldn't just leave your kids unfed or unclothed. I carried what you abandoned. Now it's your turn." The man's face tightened. "This isn't fair." I almost laughed. "Fair? Fair would have been you showing up before I ever did. Fair would have been you paying for a single doctor's bill, a single school trip, a single pair of shoes. Fair doesn't exist here. Reality does. He's your son. And now he's yours to raise." Jacob's voice cracked. "Please, don't leave me here." "He can't. He won't." But I was already walking back to the car. The last thing I saw before I closed the door was Jacob standing in the hallway, clutching his suitcase, his father staring at him like he was an unexpected bill he couldn't afford to pay. I drove away without looking back. When I returned home, the silence was deafening. Karen was waiting, her face pale, her hands trembling as she demanded to know what I'd done. Hannah hovered in the background, her eyes wide, her phone hanging uselessly at her side. "You took him there?" Karen's voice cracked, high with panic. "You actually left him with him? Do you know what kind of man he is? He can't even take care of himself." I set my keys on the counter, calm as stone. "Jacob wanted his real father. He has him now." Karen's hands flew to her face. "He's just a boy. You can't make a point like this with his life." I turned, my voice low, deliberate. "He called me a stranger in my own house. He told his friends he'd throw me out. And you let him. You stood by and let your son erase me. If he doesn't want me, he doesn't get the life I've built for him. He gets the man he worships." Her eyes burned with fury, but beneath it I saw something else. Shame. Because she knew I was right. She had watched Jacob spit in my face for years, and she had done nothing. Hannah finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "What if he doesn't come back?" I met her eyes. "Then that's his choice. And your father's failure." Karen packed a bag that night. She moved into her sister's house, dragging Hannah with her. She said she needed space. said she couldn't believe I would do something so cruel. But I noticed she didn't say I was wrong. Only that she couldn't stomach it. For a week, the house was mine alone. Empty, yes. Quiet, yes. But peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. No slamming doors. No insults. No contempt simmering in the air. Just silence. But silence never lasts. The messages started on the 8th day. First, Jacob. His words stumbled across the screen, stripped of their arrogance. I went too far. I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry. Can I come home? Then Hannah. I miss you. The house doesn't feel right without you. Please don't stay mad forever. Finally, Karen. Her tone was softer than it had been in years. I should have stepped in. I let them disrespect you for too long. I see that now. But leaving Jacob there. Please, we need to talk. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark kitchen. The apologies were heavy, but I knew better than to trust them. Words are cheap, easy, spoken when the weight of consequences lands. What I needed wasn't words. I needed proof, and proof takes more than a message. So I let the phone buzz in the silence. Jacob wanted his real father. He had him. Let him taste the difference between the fantasy and the reality. Let Karen sit with the silence she had created. Let Hannah think about what loyalty means when you watch in silence as someone tears down the man who raised you. I had nothing more to say. Not yet. A month passed before I saw Jacob again. 30 days of silence. 30 days of messages I didn't answer. 30 days of Karen's calls going to voicemail. I lived alone in the house I had paid for. The house that now echoed with a stillness I had once begged for but never truly known. In that silence, something hardened in me. I realized how quickly the noise of disrespect can erode a man, how slowly peace can rebuild him. For years I had told myself that love was unconditional, that a father figure is supposed to give endlessly, regardless of gratitude. But in the absence of their chaos, I saw the truth. Love without respect is just slavery. And I was done being a slave. The knock came one Saturday afternoon. I knew it was them before I opened the door. Jacob stood there first. Not cocky, not smirking. He looked older than the month that had passed, shoulders slouched. His eyes carrying the hollow fatigue of someone who had tasted the life he thought he wanted and found it bitter. Beside him, Hannah clutched her phone like a shield, her gaze flicking between me and the ground. Karen stood slightly behind them, her face lined with something between defiance and desperation. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The weight of years, of words, of silence, pressed between us. Finally, Jacob broke it. His voice was low, almost trembling. Can we talk? I stepped aside. Inside, we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I had paid bills late into the night, where I had eaten meals cooked with hands that never once defended me, where I had listened to laughter that excluded me. It was fitting that this was where everything would be laid bare. Jacob's hands shook as he clasped them on the table. I was wrong, he said. I said things I didn't mean. I thought Dad would step up. He didn't. I thought he cared more than you did. I was wrong. I studied him, unblinking. And what did you learn? His jaw tightened. That I was stupid. That I hurt the only person who actually stayed. Hannah finally spoke, her voice soft. I missed you. Felt empty without you around. Like the house wasn't really a home anymore. I turned to Karen. She hadn't spoken yet. Her silence was familiar, but now it trembled with something else. Fear. And you? I asked. Her lips parted, then closed again. When she finally spoke, her words were fragile. I let them disrespect you. I should have stopped it years ago. I thought it would pass, that teenagers grow out of it. But I see now, I was part of the problem. For a long time I said nothing. I let their words sit in the air, heavy and raw. Then I leaned forward. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of iron. Listen carefully. I will not tolerate disrespect again. Not once. Not from you, Jacob. Not from you, Hannah. And not from you, Karen. I'm not a wallet. I'm not a temporary guest in this house. I'm part of this family. And if anyone forgets that again, the door is always open, but only outward. Jacob's eyes flickered with shame. Hannah nodded quickly, her phone forgotten. Karen stared down at her hands, tears pooling in her eyes. I continued. You put me in the ground and expected me to keep carrying you. That ends here. If you want me in your lives, it will be with respect. Nothing less. Because the man you call your real father? He's a ghost. He comes and goes when it suits him. But me? I was here. I paid. I stayed. And you spat in my face. That won't happen again. Silence. Then Jacob whispered. It won't. Promise. But promises are air. I leaned back, folding my arms. We'll see. Words don't impress me anymore. I'll watch your actions. I'll see if respect shows up when it matters. Until then, I keep my guard up. The weeks that followed were strange. The house felt unfamiliar, like we were all strangers trying to learn each other again. Jacob tried the hardest. He started small, clearing the table after dinner without being asked, mowing the lawn without rolling his eyes. He still stumbled, but I noticed the effort. Hannah lingered near me more, her silence softening, her eyes searching for approval she hadn't cared about before. Karen. She was cautious, choosing her words carefully, watching me with the guilt of someone who knew she'd lost her place and was trying to earn it back. But I didn't let myself soften easily. I had built walls in that month of silence, and walls don't come down with a few apologies. Every smile from them felt like a test, every act of kindness like a performance. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't, but I wasn't about to gamble my life again without proof. Jacob came to me one evening, standing awkwardly in the doorway of my study. I don't know how to make it right, he admitted. I don't know how to fix what I said. I closed the laptop, meeting his eyes. You don't fix words. You replace them with actions. That's how you prove if you mean what you say. He nodded, his shoulders heavy. But I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Humility. Months passed. Slowly, the balance shifted. The respect I had begged for began to take shape. Not perfectly, not permanently, but it was there. Still, the memory of that night, Jacob's voice bragging to his friends that I was a stranger, lingered like a scar. Because here is the truth. Forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal. It just builds a new layer on top of it. The crack is always there, waiting. Sometimes I catch Karen looking at me when she thinks I'm not watching. There's fear in her eyes. Fear that I'll leave. Fear that I'll decide their second chance isn't worth it. And maybe one day I will. Because even now, when the house feels steadier, when Jacob mows the lawn without complaint and Hannah sits beside me during movies again, I know the truth. I'll never be their real father. That man will always hold the title in their minds, no matter how many times he fails them. But I am the man who stayed, the man who paid, the man who drew the line when no one else would. And if that earns me respect, it will be on my terms. So I leave you with this. Was I wrong to draw the line, to put Jacob's suitcase on the doorstep, to make them taste the consequences of their words? Or was it the only way left to prove that respect is not optional, that family without respect is nothing but a cage? You tell me.